This episode of Backlisted is brought to you by Serious Readers, a reading lamp for people like you and me.
Serious readers.
I've got one of these lamps, and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great lamp for reading indoors.
Perfect now the night's getting darker because it simulates daylight with its HD light.
Which means you can read for hours and hours without any risk of eye strain.
The great news is Serious Readers are giving Backlisted listeners £100 off any HD light and free UK delivery.
Just go to seriousreaders.com/backlisted and use the discount code BACK, B-A-C-K.
That's seriousreaders.com/backlisted with the code BACK.
And there's a 30-day risk-free trial, so you can return the light after 30 days for free if you're unhappy with it, which I very much doubt you will be.
So without further ado, lights out for the podcast.
Hello and welcome to Backlisted, the podcast which gives new life to old books. Today, you find us in downtown New York. It's 1951, and we're in an untidy hotel bedroom. Sitting hunched on the edge of the bed is a large man with short greying hair and green striped pyjamas. On the bedside table next to him is a glass of bourbon, an empty bottle, and an overflowing ashtray. He gives a heavy sigh and turns to the young blonde woman in a white blouse sitting next to him. She leans in and kisses his face repeatedly. I'm John Mitchinson, the publisher of Unbound, where people pledge to support the books they really want to read.
And I'm Andy Miller, the author of The Year of Reading Dangerously. And today we are joined by two guests, one new and one returning. The returning guest is publisher Nat Janscz, and we are delighted to welcome for the first time the American writer Jeffery Renard Allen. Hello to you both.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, guys.
Great to be back.
Great to be back. Thanks, Nat. That was good. That was
Nice
slick.
to have you back.
Thanks very much.
Well, it's an honor to be here. Yes.
Wow, that's so nice.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you so much. It's an honour to have you. Jeff Renard Allen is the award-winning author of 6 books of fiction and poetry, including the celebrated novel Song of the Shank, which was a front-page review in both the New York Times Book Review and the San Francisco Chronicle. He was a finalist for both the Penn Faulkner Award and the Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction. Jeff is the founder and editor of Taint, Taint, Taint magazine and is the Africa editor for the Evergreen Review. His latest books are the short story collection Fat Time and the memoir An Unspeakable Hope, the latter co-authored with Leon Ford. Jeff is at work on several projects, including a memoir entitled Motherwit and a speculative novel called Radar Country and the short story collection Try Me. Jeff, and this is fortunate, isn't it, is also a former student of Lore Segal and will be writing the introduction for the Sort of Books edition of the novel we're here to discuss, Her First American, which will be published by our other guest, Nat Janscz.
Yay! It's almost like we've planned this.
Jeff, you're joining us from New York City, and just very briefly, give us a quick description of the room in which you are sitting.
I just moved into a new apartment, so it's kind of a loft with 2 different levels. So I'm sitting in what would be my kitchen combined living room. So, yes.
If it sounds like Jeff is sitting in a swimming pool, everybody, you have no furniture yet, do you?
No, I have no furniture. I hope to get everything out of storage tomorrow. So.
Well, we're really grateful that you agreed to sit in an empty room. Turning to you, Nat. Nat Janscz is a publisher and the co-founder of Sort of Books, which she runs in partnership with her husband, Mark Ellingham. Sort of were founded in 1999 and enjoyed early success with Chris Stewart's Driving Over Lemons, which went on to sell over 1 million copies, many of them sold by me in some capacity, I think.
Thank you,
I
Andy.
hand-sold that, Nat,
Yeah.
so welcome. Despite, or perhaps because of only publishing a handful of books a year, they have a roster of wonderful authors, including Stefan Zweig, Jonathan Buckley, Alexander Barron, hooray, Sophie Hannah, Kathleen Jamie, and Peter Blegvad, hooray, and a soon-to-publish Folio Award-winning novelist, Michel de Kretzer. They have pioneered the republishing of Tove Jansson's work in English. And listeners will remember that Nat last joined us in November 2018, 6 years ago, in person, along with now Children's Laureate Frank Cottrell Boyce, to discuss Tove Jansson's Moomin Valley in November. In 2022, Sautov published The Seven Moons of Marley Almeida by Shehan. Oh, God almighty. I'm so sorry.
Karunathilika.
I practiced so much for the actual show that Shehan was on. I've now forgotten. I apologise to him if he hears this anyway. And that won that year's Booker Prize, making Sautov the smallest independent publisher ever to win the book. I didn't know that. Wow. They are also the UK publishers of Lore Segal, subject of today's episode. I must ask you, Nat, did you think that The Seven Moons of Marley Almeida would win the Booker Prize?
I was certain of it. Spoken like a true publisher. It was my inspirational talk to Shehan was, keep going, Shehan, keep going. You're not just publishing this as a sort of great piece of world literature. You're going to win the Booker Prize. And after I'd said that about sort of 15 times, even I found that a bit hollow. So it was terrific that he won it.
Well, it's a terrific book. He was a wonderful guest. He came on here and talked about Kurt Vonnegut. We really, really enjoyed that episode, didn't we, John? That was really good.
We did.
And which book are we here to discuss?
And the book we're here to discuss is Her First American by Lore Segal, first published in 1985 by Knopf in America, reissued in 2004 by the New Press, and soon to be published, as we've said, in the UK for the first time by Sautov Books. It was also a book Andy talked about with great enthusiasm on a previous episode of Backlisted, although which episode that was, I can't find.
Well, I think it was an episode of Lot Listed, but we'll say a bit
maybe
more
it was.
about that in a
Maybe it
moment.
was. Anyway, the story of Her First American follows the Jewish refugee Ilka Weissnix, who arrives in America having just turned 21 after spending a decade escaping from Hitler's Europe and becoming separated from her family in the process. Speaking barely any English, she rooms with her cousin in New York's Upper West Side, the cousin we only ever know as Fishgopple, and soon embarks on a relationship with Carter Bayoux, a black, middle-aged, alcoholic poet and intellectual who she meets randomly in a bar in Cowtown, Nevada, and who becomes her first American.
The novel is the record of their always touching, often funny, and inescapably sad relationship. Segal, whose life story resembles Ilka's in many ways, always called the book her favourite child, describing it as an upside-down Henry James novel, because Henry James believed that the innocent American would expand his knowledge or her knowledge by coming in contact with the sophisticated European. Here, the European is the innocent and the black man is the endlessly sophisticated. She doesn't teach him anything, but he teaches her everything. But it was the New York Times review that laid down the gauntlet, writing at the time that, quote, Lore Segal may have come closer than anyone to writing the great American novel. And that is a gauntlet we intend to pick up in this episode. But before we plunge into it, here's a message from our sponsors.
How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
And we're back.
Hooray.
So, Jeffrey, I will ask the question we always start the podcast with, where were you? Who were you? What were you doing? How old were you when you first encountered either Her First American or the work of Lore Segal?
Actually, Lori and I have debated this, but but we met in either 1980 or 1981. I was a student at the University of Illinois at Chicago, where Lori taught. Lori lived in New York, but she taught in Chicago. And I was probably about 19 years old when I took a fiction writing workshop with her. And that's how we met. And we've stayed in touch all these many years, have become close friends. And I consider her like a second mother to me, I would say. So I was still an undergraduate when the book was originally published in 1985, and that's how I first read the book. James Earl Jones passed away yesterday.
Yeah.
And I do know at one point the novel was optioned, and somehow James Earl Jones read the novel, and he was interested in playing Carter. But for whatever reason, the production company, they were never able to get us a workable screenplay together.
Can I just interrupt and say, when I first read this novel, which was 4 years ago, James Earl Jones is who I cast in my head while I was reading it.
Oh, okay.
So perfect.
There are a couple other interesting things. As you know, the character of Carter is based on a real person, Horace Caton. And I should say that even in the 80s, when I first met Lori, Horace Caton, he had passed away by then, but he was a fairly well-known figure in Chicago intellectual circles, especially among Black people, because he was the co-author of a seminal book about Black Chicago, which is called Black Metropolis. So Horace Caton was a figure known to many Black intellectuals and such in Chicago, so that was another interesting connection, that I had with the novel.
Wow, that's wonderful. Okay.
Yeah.
Nat, you published Lori in the UK, bringing her books to a new audience. When did you first encounter her work, and when did you first meet her?
Well, actually, it was my partner, Mark, who came across Ladies' Lunch when it was published in The New Yorker and thought this was a terrific writer. What an extraordinary story. It was a story about an elderly woman getting together with a group of friends, all nonagenarians, all talking about the affronts and puzzles of aging, and very wittily done. And, it's a beautifully crafted story. So we went back over her oeuvre and found that other people's houses hadn't got a UK publisher.
We'll come on to it, but it's the memoir of her childhood, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's what launched her. That was the first stories which were published in The New Yorker about her being a 10-year-old, being put on the Kindertransport from Vienna to get her away from Nazi persecution in Vienna, being given up by loving parents to come on her own into the arms of strangers in England, being moved around foster homes. And it's an extraordinary story. And so we went out and met Lori when we published this book, which was 2018. So it was about the time that you were talking about her first American, I think, Andy.
Yes, so about 5-6 years ago,
yeah. We went to New York and we met her at a wonderful Riverside Drive apartment in the Upper West Side. And, we walked into this flat and there was an elderly Lori. She was 90 years old, very nimble with her walker in the flat and with these penetrating bright eyes and this wit and humour and warmth about her and sharp as a tack. And as we came into the flat, we saw there was a picture in her hall of Lore Segal drawn by her friend, her late friend, Maurice Sendak, of Lori as a wild thing. And that's the image of Lori in my mind. Lori is a wild thing. And then a room full of Pfeiffer drawings. She was in there with all those lovely sort of modernist artists, and it was an extraordinary thing. And then she broached us with, okay, so what more are you going to publish in my books? And told me about her favourite book, her first American. And it's to our shame, really, that it's taken us so long to come round to it, but I'm very pleased that we have.
Well, presumably there's an element, I'm deferring to my publisher colleague John here, but in a certain way, you don't want the first single from the album to be the immediate hit. You want to build the profile of the author in the UK before you then segue into their favourite book, perhaps.
Well, that's a nice way to look at it. There's also there were other things to do with Lore as well. She was publishing these stories, the ladies' lunch stories, and we wanted to work with her on those while she was interested in them and they were very current. And that was a marvelous project. So I have no regrets about doing that. The amazing thing about Lore is nearing the end of her life. She knows that we're doing this podcast, by the way. and she was very pleased. And as you said, this was her favorite book and she wanted us to talk about her first American. What's extraordinary is that Lore has always had this talent for finding life interesting. That's her big defense. And with her ladies' lunch stories, it was all about, here I am at this stage of my life. Isn't it interesting? Look what's happening to me. Isn't it interesting? And she's still generating stories. So we're running to keep up with the 95-year-old Lore.
I'm terribly impressed, Nat, that you took on an extremely sharp, nonagenarian New Yorker author keen to promote their work, because that strikes me as being one of the wonderful things about Lore, right? That she's here now when you have published her. You know, she is a working writer.
She is. She's also very gracious. And I don't know if she told you this, Jeffery, when she was teaching you, that she always tells her students to try and do whatever editors ask of them so that they can store up goodwill for that one time that they're going to say no. She was edited by Bob Gottlieb at Knopf and New Yorker. They disagreed on the cover of her hardback.
Okay. Okay, so I'd just like to also add, I first read this book 4 years ago, and I've got to give a shout out to Backlisted listener and bookseller and author Tom Nisley. Thank you so much, Tom. I talked about her first American on an episode of Locklisted. You sent it to me during the darkest times of the first COVID lockdown. You thought I might like it. Well, I absolutely loved it. I think it's one of the best novels I've read in the last 10 years. So thank you, Tom. We probably wouldn't be making this episode had you not hit me to it then. I have thought about it repeatedly over the last several years since I read it. I tried to get John Mitchinson to read it, but he was busy. He was always on a call. He was like, but thanks to you, Nat and Jeff, John Mitchinson has now read her first American. What did you make of it, Johnny?
I'd just put it exactly in the same class as you have. I think it's one of the finest things I've read in many years. It's so approachably easy to read, and yet manages to get that kind of profundity that I guess a lot of writers would struggle to get. It looks to some extent artless. It looks like a series of dialogues. The more you read it and the more you think about it, the more you think, what exactly did happen? I had to go back. I've had to read it twice because you get to the end. It's a pretty extraordinary ending, and then you want to go back and unpack some of the scenes. It's a really, really fine novel.
Well, I think it's important to introduce this note before we move on to discuss her first American, which is Lore's extraordinary life, which Nat has alluded to. And here's a clip from 5-6 years ago where Lore, at the age of 90, is recalling her life and how she came to be a storyteller. And piano accompaniment is baked in, I'm afraid, but let's listen to it now.
I'm Lore Segal, and I have written a book called Other People's Houses. I was 10 years old in 1938 when Hitler annexed Austria. We were thrown out of our apartment. We were then moved in with my grandparents in a nearby village of fishermen. And when my grandfather's house and shop were taken by the Nazis, we then had to come back to Vienna and lived with various cousins. I lived with a school friend. Came the day when my father picked me up from my friend and said that we were going to go for a couple of days. I was going to stay with them, my parents and my grandparents, who had found an apartment together. And he said, "You're going to England." it had become clear to my parents that they had no means in sight of getting out of Austria. So my father insisted, my mother reluctantly agreed to let me go on the children's transport. And I went to a party given by the students in this class. And somebody said to me, "How did you get to America?" And I began to tell the story, and everybody was silent and listening. And I thought, "Ooh, this is great." That was the moment when I realized I had stories to tell.
Well, there is her account, and I'd like to ask you first, Jeff. There's a thing that's popular at the moment, modish at the moment, called autofiction, which we've dealt with several times on this podcast. Would it be fair or unfair to describe Her First American as a work of autofiction?
I think it would be unfair to describe it that way. You know, Lore always, as memory serves me, Lore always talked about the book very specifically as a novel. And I think she chose to write it as a novel because she wanted to have a certain distance between her life and the actual words she was putting on the page. So she wasn't attempting to simply record her life. And as I think of autofiction, it's not only a type of literature or prose literature specifically that is about the author's life, but it tends to go off on various tangents and associations. And I don't see any of that happening in any of Lore's work. I would say she's very much a realist novelist, as opposed to someone who was venturing into this mode of autofiction.
Jeff, because you are American, I mean, I'm a British person. I found this novel deeply appealing because it seemed to me to celebrate and mark the limits of the discussion of multiculturalism within America, how it works, how it doesn't work. When you read it for the first time, did it ring true for you in that respect?
You know, I have to say that unfortunately, when I read the novel for the first time, I was, very much politically engaged and read it through a political lens. That's the way I saw the world at the time. And I think the thing that I've come to learn about this novel and about Lore's work in general is that she doesn't see the world in easily defined political terms. So I think Her First American works to upset our expectations about how we can easily be defined by race or by gender, for that matter. I think that's one of the things that's really interesting about it, is that it tries to do more than just speak about the world in a political frame, whether it's through race or whether it's through gender or whether it's through what it means to be Jewish, you know.
Completely.
I read this in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. Mm-hmm. People will remember that the summer of 2020 wasn't just the first COVID lockdown, it was also the surge in Black Lives Matter protests. And I found it very interesting what Jeffery was saying there. And I'd like just to read you, Nat, a short review of this novel, Her First American, from a well-known reading website, and ask you to react to it, because in a sense it's reflecting what Jeff was just saying in a less positive way. 3 stars. A 21-year-old Austrian Holocaust survivor falls in love with a middle-aged alcoholic African-American man in the 1950s. A poignant conversation about religion, race, and class. Segal is witty and funny at times. For the most part, I found this book rather boring, but the message was powerful. No matter who we are, we all have prejudices. Now, that's said without irony by that reviewer, as far as I can work out. But there we go. No matter who we are, we all have prejudices. I didn't find this book boring at all. Sorry, anonymous reviewer.
No, she makes it sound like porridge, doesn't she? Not literature. It's sort of very weird.
Yeah.
I think there's something extraordinary about Laurie's ability to tune into life. She's the observer. Something that Vivian Gornick pointed out was her ability to be detached, a little bit detached, in order to not be reacting all the time, but observing. She sort of uses herself as a conduit for the reader. So the emotions don't sit on the page. You don't have anger at the terrible treatment of various characters. You have her telling you what happens, and you play out that in your own. The reader is enlisted to have the feelings, which makes it incredibly powerful. But there's no testifying in Laurie's books. It's not, nothing is simple, everything is nuanced. And something that I think she always tries to do is she's trying to get at the truth. Why Her First American is so extraordinary in the oeuvre of Laurie's work is that some of the books are super cool in that detachment. And in this, it's like she went through the emotional blast zone of the Second World War, of being thrown out, really. I mean, she escapes, but having to escape this terrible persecution. And she sort of freezes. And in Her First American, you see this character, the character of Ilka Weissnix, Ilka Know Nothing.
Know Nothing, yeah.
Suddenly becomes sort of, she thaws. She becomes naturalized through Carter Bayoux.
Mitch, I'm going to ask you an A-level question about this novel. So prepare, get ready, use both sides of the paper if necessary. Her First American by Lore Segal is a novel in which there are no supporting characters. Discuss.
That's very clever. I like that. I think the book is about Ilka's relationship with Carter. I think you have to say that Ebony plays a pretty important part in the story. There was a big chunk of the book in the middle of the book. They go and have a Connecticut holiday in a really nice house. And that's a pretty important bit. And I think you'd have to say they are kind of supporting the main relate,
but they aren't. I would suggest, student, who I've given you a B+ there. I would suggest.
I haven't got to my big one yet, which is the mother, I think is who is fundamental to the book.
But there are no stock characters in this novel.
No, I see what you mean.
Every time you encounter a fresh personality.
I completely agree with that. This is the genius, I think, of the book. She's so good at describing. She describes the emotional state that Carter is in without psychologizing it, without analyzing it.
Judging.
You never really know exactly. There's all sorts of clues as to what's gone wrong in Carter's life, but they're never made explicit. Similarly, the mother, in the same way, I think it's brilliantly done. The dream about the ants and the burglars coming to get her. I mean, it's just a presentation of somebody who has been through deep trauma, the obsession with going back to the very spot that she last saw her husband. It would be very easy for any of the minor characters in the book to fall into cliche, and she never does that.
I wonder, Jeffrey, could you read us an extract from the beginning of the novel, which is a scene with 3 characters in it, even though one of them is what we would think of as a supporting character, not a stock character.
Yes, I would be happy to. Ilka had been 3 months in the country when she went west and discovered her first American sitting on a stool in a bar in the desert across from the railroad. He was a big man. He brought her a whiskey and asked her what in the name of the blessed Jehoshaphat she was doing in Cowtown, Nevada. Nevada, Ilka had said. I have believed I am in Utah, isn't it? Utah, the big American turned a sick color. Where the hell am I? He asked the barman. Hagen, ass end of no place, Nevada, replied the barman and swiped his dish towel at a glass mug. Aha, so Ilka sipped her whiskey and, hiding her smiling teeth inside her glass, said, I do not believe. What don't you believe? Asked the American. That I sit in Utah. Nevada, said the American. I do not believe Nevada, Utah, America.
It's a hell of an opening. It's brilliant.
Jeff, could I ask you then about that initial scene in the bar? How does Lore achieve that expansion of character via dialogue? How do you think she does that?
Oh, that's a good question. I wish I had a good answer to give you. She's essentially doing what she does in much of the book, which is she's telling a story in some sense from a remove so that we are left to read the characters and the situation for ourselves. And obviously, at this particular point in the book, Ilka has not mastered the English language, and that becomes very clear. But also, one of the things we see here is Carter's wit and humor, which is something that will be on display throughout the book. And then we primarily also see the common theme of the novel, which is Ilka's discovery of America and what it means to be American. And, that is the educational journey that she goes on in much of the book.
But it's amazing in that first chapter when the men come into the bar and Carter sort of doesn't exactly freeze because he continues doing exactly what he's doing, but there's a frozen quality to it, that he knows that he's now in a very precarious position. He's talking to a white woman in a bar with rednecks. And that's phenomenally well done.
So
you feel that
brilliantly
frisson,
done.
Yeah.
I think, John, for me, that was one of the huge pleasures of reading this novel for the first time, was exactly the thing Nat has just described there. Seeing the depth of field of any given comment, stray passing comment or joke. She's so good in this novel at presenting you with, what do I want to say? Context without hammering the context. So it's almost miraculous to me, Nat, how that scene you've just described, that tension is really there. And you like Ilsa are learning about America, but you're learning it by implication, aren't you? You're learning it by what you can infer rather than what you're being told.
And she doesn't sense the danger at that point, because at this point she doesn't even know, as she says, she doesn't even know what a Negro is. One of the great things is watching her build her model of the world, and he is incredibly generous with in the way that he helps her to do that. The book is full of these brilliant little exchanges between the two of them, and her getting, her trying things out and being secretly thrilled. There's a little passage again from sort of towards the middle of the book where they're lying in bed together, and she's talking about Percival, who's a very smart black intellectual who's got a girlfriend who Ilka doesn't like.
Can I just say that I think the Percival character, isn't he possibly based on Richard Wright, Jeffrey? Do you think?
I think he's based on Richard Wright, but also on Charles White, the
artist.
Yeah,
the artist. Yes, both. Yes.
But there's just a great little. She says, "Well, why did he marry what's her name again? Doris May," said Carter. "I guess he likes her. She is not interesting." Ilka felt a personal affront when interesting men like dull women. "She doesn't talk," said Ilka. "She talks to me. I like Doris May." "And why would Doris May marry?" Ilka became puzzled and stopped. "A Negro twice her age?" "You think I mean that?" cried Ilka. "What did you mean?" "That," said Ilka with a thrill of revelation. "I'm a racist." "Not to worry," Carter said. "Some of my best friends are racists." I mean, it's just brilliant, isn't it? And you think she's not concerned. A lot of writers would be troubled to try and write a scene like that, I think, by eggshells and not wanting to offend and not. But she's amazing.
Let me ask you, Jeff and Nat, one of the things that struck me when I was reading this book from 1985 in 2020 is how it would be written differently now, or it would probably be written differently now. Not by Lore necessarily, but it's an extremely bold, artistic attempt to speak for a variety of different peoples and people. And she does it, and she does it absolutely brilliantly.
Especially here in America, we have become so territorial. So, for example, as a Black writer, I should not write about white people, or as a man, I should not write about women. Yeah. So certainly Lore was defying many of the accepted literary standards of the times in terms of who owns what material, who has a right to write about whatever. And I think the book was transgressive in that way. Transgressive isn't a word I would normally use when I think about Lore, but I think I think she was simply being herself and being realistic and truthful to the way that she saw the world. But that was not how we as Americans think about literature. And maybe I could add this. One of the things I've always enjoyed about my relationship with Lore, and I don't want to overstate this, but I always feel that she brings a European perspective or an old world perspective and her thinking about the world, which has allowed me to look beyond, the way that Americans typically think about themselves in the world, I believe. And I do think that a European perspective is reflected in the book and how she chooses to write about these various characters from different racial and gender backgrounds.
But but Jeffrey, I think Lore is unique, don't you? I mean, we know lots of Europeans here, and and she doesn't follow rules unless those rules make her feel that she's getting to the truth. She works away to try and find the truth, and that means paying attention to nuance, paying attention to layers. Questioning things. She'll always push back with a why.
Yeah, there's a great little interview that she did with the magazine. She said, "There's nothing I can tell you about myself to which your understanding does not have access. I don't have that sense of shame, or rather I have it, but don't pay much attention to it, because I'm more interested in figuring out what it is that's being felt. I say to my writing students, the one thing you can rely on in any situation is that the feelings you're going to have are not the ones you think you're supposed to have."
Yeah.
And I think that ability to look at
very good.
Exactly. What's actually going on rather than what you're supposed to feel in any given moment. And Ilka's a brilliant device for doing that.
Okay, so we're going to take a little break now. And when we come back, John, I'm going to give you an example. You mentioned Lore's students, and you mentioned about the fidelity to truth and feeling. When we come back, we have an example of her talking about someone else's book in exactly those terms. So we'll see you in a moment.
New Vitamin Water Zero Sugar Pineapple Passion Fruit is packed with vitamins, just like the amount of peas we packed in that sentence. It's packed like your tote bag, the one you stole from your ex, or your overpriced half a studio apartment, or extra rushed rush hour traffic. Packed like your calendar, triple booked at 5, of course. Grab a vitamin water. Did we mention it's packed with vitamins?
Finding a new job is stressful. But with Indeed, it doesn't have to be. Just fill out your Indeed profile with your skills, experience, and desired salary. The more you fill out, the better your matches will be. And hearing from hiring managers will be 2 times more likely. Relax. That's your Indeed profile sending opportunities your way. Indeed, the world can work better.
Switch to Verizon Business and get more from your internet without paying more for your internet. Get LTE Business Internet starting at $39 a month when paired with select business mobile plans. That's unlimited data, and with it, unlimited possibilities. Start saving today with Verizon Business, ranked #1 in small business internet customer satisfaction by J.D. Power. Starting price for 25 megabits per second LTE internet plan with smartphone plan savings, plus taxes, fees, and economic adjustment charge. Terms apply. For J.D. Power 2024 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Welcome back. We're here discussing Her First American by Lore Segal with Jeff, Alan, and Nat Janscz. And we were hearing about how Lore, as a teacher, would say to her students that you must be true to the feeling of something when you're writing about it. And I found a really interesting essay, which I just want to read you the conclusion of. And this is about Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. And up to this point in the essay, Laura has written about the Dashwoods, Eleanor, Marianne, and then she switches into the first person mode. And so she switches from what we would think of as a traditional critical voice into a memoirist's voice, the better to illuminate what she wants to say about Sense and Sensibility. The widow Dashwood, Eleanor, Marianne, and Margaret have been declared to be perfectly comfortable. Mr. and Mrs. John can keep their inheritance all to themselves and feel righteous doing so. And the reader gets to enjoy yet another pleasure, the sense of cleverness, of his penetration, the thrill of intellectual and moral kinship with the writer. If Jane Austen were around, I would catch her eye to let her know that I get it. Or is it that Jane Austen is getting me? Giving it to me. I'm having that well-documented experience of approaching a person who looks unpleasantly familiar, someone of whom I don't entirely approve, in the moment before I recognise it is a mirror I am walking towards. Jane Austen is holding the mirror up to my nature. Story has the power to prevent my natural tendency to cover myself from my own observation. How familiar the last time I paid my taxes was the experience that it was inconvenient, my regret that so large a sum was to be parted with, my irritation at the trouble of getting it to them, the realization that money once parted with never can return, and the feeling that this, happening over and over every year, made my income not my own. Wait, I have an inheritance story too. My parents-in-law's ageing aunt, call her Minnie, must not have read her King Lear, for she gave away her summer house on a New England lake to her children, a chilly son and his beautiful wife. The following summer, the young people invited their mother to spend a weekend at the lake. Then they sent her home to broil in New York. When Minnie became a nuisance, they put her in a nursing home. My husband's parents went secretly, took their aunt out, and brought her home with them. Minnie disinherited her son and daughter-in-law, settled everything on the niece and nephew, and died. Her children were advised against seeking legal redress, there being no legal leg to stand on. By year's end, both of my parents-in-law had died as well. Minnie's children may not have deserved the inheritance, but neither did I or mine. I had thought the old woman a nuisance. My children had refused to kiss her. Did it occur to me to pass the inheritance back to the blood relatives? Briefly, in a world of speculation only. I was by then widowed with 2 little children. The chilly son and the beautiful wife were better off than I. Would I, had they been worse off, have given them what was legally my children's? Would you? Oh, Mrs. John Dashwood, notre semblable. That's the end of the essay. That's wonderful.
So great.
I think as both literary criticism and memoir. What was it like, Jeffrey, being taught by the writer, Lore Segal?
Oh, it was a great experience having Lore as a teacher. One of the things I would say is that I'm a very different kind of writer than she is. She once used the word Baroque to describe the kind of writing that I do, whereas she leans more towards Jane Austen and Chekhov, among other people. And that said, what was great about her is that she could, she taught me very much about the importance of trying to figure out what I really believe about the world, trying to figure out what I really feel in a particular moment and how to get that on the page. And she also was able to direct me to writers that I could use as models.
Such as, can you remember?
Well, at a certain point, I became enamored with Faulkner, which was a writer I hadn't read, but that she recommended.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that was great about her as a teacher is that she did not try to impose her own literary taste on the students, but she did the best that she could to help us understand what we were trying to do as writers and how we could better do it.
Well, here is a clip of Lore recorded last year at the age of 95, articulating why she writes and why what she hopes others will achieve through their writing.
Well, the impulse, as you and I have now agreed, was to correct a mistaken or an absent information. But the thing is, once a writer starts writing, it becomes something different. It becomes that desire. I think to say, what was it like, is really the most correct a way to put it. Once I got going, I wanted to convey the experience. I wouldn't have put it that way when I was 10 years old, but that's what I was trying to do. Here's what it felt like. Here's what it was like when this happened or that happened. And then you start describing. You describe the circumstances. You describe the ambience. You describe what you were wearing. You would describe when you opened the door and what happened when you went through it. Once you have become a writer, what something was like is a stronger impulse than to bear political witness.
Yeah.
Nat, we had a hurried editorial conference during the advert break there, and we decided that it would be preferable not to discuss the ending of Her First American. All I will say is that is a devastatingly truthful ending.
Yes.
That novel. But you wanted to read us something that summarized that similar sense of truthful expression of emotion, realistic.
Yes, it's just the way that Lore will get to what does it feel like? And I thought this was extraordinary. This is a young girl. She must be 10 or 11. She's been called out of class into the study of the headmaster to be told that the impossible, a miracle has happened. Her parents, who she thinks like the other Jewish children's parents in her class, the other refugees, that her parents would be dead, that she has managed to write a letter that has got her parents a visa to Britain, and they've arrived. And she's called to the headmistress's office and is told this. She says, "Well," said Mrs. Levine, "so aren't you excited, you funny child?" "Yes, I am. I'm excited," I said. But I was busy noticing the way my chest was emptying, my head clearing, and my shoulders being freed of some huge weight that must, since I now felt it being rolled away, have been there all this time without my knowing it. Just as when the passing of nausea or the unknotting of a cramp leaves the body with a new awareness of itself. I stood sensuously at ease, breathing in and out. Mrs. Levine was saying to the headmaster, "You never know with children. All she ever does is mope around the house and write letters, and now she isn't even pleased." But I think that's the sort of way that Lore writes. She notices what really matters in a scene.
Can I just draw the listener's attention to one quiet but brilliant phrase in the section from Other People's Houses that Nat just read? I stood sensuously at ease.
There's Lore for you.
Now that's what a real writer does. Do you know what I mean, Jeff? It's like that's a tiny passing phrase which isn't even designed to catch the eye in the way it caught mine there, but is so perfect, it seems to me.
But who out of all of us didn't fall in love with Carter Bayoux? The incredible charisma of the man and the erudition and that worldliness of him. I mean, if you're an inexperienced young woman seeking to know more about the world, what better teacher? And she gets that across so well. And yet he's a big guy and he's much older, and they can't have sex. He can't make love to her the first time they try. He asks her to sleep with him, meaning fall asleep with me, because he was too drunk. But that's amazing.
This also is in the genre, and to some extent, isn't it, of the campus novel. These are intellectuals. And it seems to me almost a subversion of the campus novel. You know, the heavy drinking intellectual who feuds with other heavy drinking intellectuals in the tradition of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, but written by an outsider about, in some ways, another outsider.
Yeah. I think her great campus novel actually is An Absence of Cousins. And I think this it sort of plays on a homogeneity of people, which the outsider then joins. And in this, there's no one character is like any other character.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, her genius for also, I have to say, just for creating things very, very quickly. And she says, on the 16th floor of the Bloomsbury Arms lived and practiced Dr. J.C. McSamuels, whose nature, appearance, and manner had predestined him to be one of the lovable characters in a novel Charles Dickens did not get around to writing. It's so great. You immediately know who Dr. McSamuels is. You know, he's a kind of Wemmick figure.
John, do you have a little bit?
Well, I could read a little bit without introducing all the characters, but...
Well, the magnificent Ebony.
The magnificent Ebony.
Yeah.
Ilka senses that Ebony is kind of... she disagrees a little with Carter about what's he says, Ilka says she's cross because she can't sleep. And Carter, you feel all the time Carter's always got this deeper, richer, more complex series of reasons. But Ebony likes to get, I mean, obviously they're former lovers, gets him to tell a story, a funny story. Ebony says, Carter, tell how you lost your head in Syracuse, New York. That is a funny story. So Carter goes on, not in Syracuse, New York, Knossos, New York, said Carter, is where I lost my head. That was the time I still went all over and lectured on race relations in clubs and organizations and churches and universities. That was okay. What I couldn't take was afterwards, when I was exhausted from the trip and the talk and wanted to hole up in some little black hotel with a bottle of booze and pass out. There was the dinner at some white faculty's house and the reception to meet students and all those questions and all that goodwill. Got so I didn't mind talking to white folks, said Carter, so they didn't talk to me about race relations. All that goodwill, said Ebony. So I'm at the University of Knossos, New York, and the dean comes up, says, Mr. Bayoux, I know that I'm talking on behalf of all my faculty and students and everyone who has heard your eloquent and moving address here tonight. Everyone stops talking. Everyone is listening. When I say that this has been a memorable occasion for us, you have given us food for thought, Mr. Bayoux. You have made us aware of situations and conditions that I do not ordinarily come our way, I'm ashamed to say, and Mr. Bayoux, we owe you a debt of gratitude. And I will speak to my faculty, and I will speak to our student body and to our civic leaders and the leaders in the private sector, who I am certain will wish to join me in turning this feeling into something tangible. We want, Mr. Bayoux, to do something not only for your people, but to express our gratitude to you personally in any way or form you may wish to suggest to us. Mr. Bayoux, is there something, sir, that we can do for you? Well, I was moved. All those good white faces, so pleased and so eager. I lost my head. Lost your head, said Ebony. I told him, I said, well, yes, as a matter of fact, something does come to mind. I'm 2/3 into my book about the effect of an emerging Africa on the American Negro that I've been working on for the last couple of years. Now, if I could take the spring off and work through the summer in some quiet place, Percival smiled, just outside of town. People began to laugh. On one of your beautiful lakefronts, perhaps some little cottage. Sure lost your head. Ebony nodded so profoundly she sandwiched little Annie between her breasts and her lap. Annie giggled. Just a little old cottage, said Ebony. On the lakefront, shouted Carter. Dean said, we will certainly look into that little matter for you. Keep our eyes skinned, see what we can come up with, hollered Carter. We want you to believe, I know everyone here with me 100%, what a truly, truly memorable occasion this has been for every single one of us here. Sure was one memorable occasion, yelled Ebony. Just a little cottage, just right on the lakefront. Ilka held a smile through the protracted storm of black laughter. It's just perfect. It's funny and it's perfect and it's subtle. It's so good.
As someone who writes comic prose themselves, I would like to say that the rhythmic elements of Laura's prose are often very, very funny. The beats are where they ought to be all the time. They land all the time. It's really a really accomplished comic writing apart from anything else. So listen, we're heading into the final straight of the episode. Jeff, I would like to ask you, firstly, have you written your introduction to the new edition of Her First American yet?
I have indeed written it, yes.
Okay, good, Nat. That's good, right?
Oh, yeah.
Without giving away anything, what is the thing that, more than anything else, that you want to communicate to readers of this novel?
Well, one of the things that strikes me about Ilka is that she is often curious about the world. And one of the things I try to bring out in my introduction is if the book is at all autobiographical, then Ilka and Lore are, very much equal in their curiosity about the world. And I think that curiosity is reflected in the novel. And the other thing I would say is what I was saying earlier about how this novel is transgressive and refusing to play by the rules in terms of race and gender and that kind of thing.
Jeffrey, do you have the intro to read the last paragraph of it? Because it's so moving.
Okay, I'll just read that then. And here is where Segal's novel speaks most to us today, at this time when ethnic gatekeeping and accusations of cultural appropriation make creating art about the other contentious and controversial. By now, we must know that the human heart cannot be policed. Attuned to our shared humanity, the artist is tasked with examining felt life in all its complexity and ambiguity. Her First American stands as a stunning achievement because Segal is willing to sound the depths and dangers of existence and show us what is true about ourselves and the world.
Brilliant.
No further questions, Your Honour. Well, that's wonderful, Jeff. Thanks so much. Gosh, that's very moving. Nat, you were telling us something before we started recording that I think we should share with anyone listening to the show today.
Well, something that Lore is approaching the end of her life. She knows this. She wrote to Mark and I and all of her editors and I think you too, Jeffrey, to say that she could no longer eat or drink and had maybe days, maybe weeks, maybe months left her, or maybe like Jimmy Carter, 3 years, And we jumped on the email and said, choose 3 years, Lore. It's we want you to read the reviews of your book that's coming out, but also, we all just felt so deeply about it. And she's with us still, and she managed to tell her daughter Beatrice that she was pleased that we were doing this podcast and going to be talking about Her First American. And there's something. Oh, I also want to give you the news that Lore, in the last month, so nearly 2 months ago, she had a story published in the New Yorker.
In the New Yorker, yeah.
Called Beyond Imagining. And it has this great line, group of old women meet and they decide, that with no need for discussion, they agree that they are not going to pass or pass away or on any consideration pass on, that they're going to die when they die. And Lore has that sort of absolutely looking at things squarely. And she has just had the news that another set of stories are going to be put together as a sort of portmanteau story and published in the New Yorker.
Wow.
So
wonderful.
This is a woman who is writing for the New Yorker now,
Right now.
Amazing.
Well,
it's astonishing.
I want to break the fourth wall, and I'm going to hope and think that Laurie might be listening to me talking right now, and so I'm not addressing any listener now except Laurie. And we've never met Laurie, and I just want to say that I, a callow English youth of 56, utterly loved Her First American. And I want to say directly to you, thank you for writing that novel 40 years ago that landed with me all that time later. Thank you for expanding my horizons. But most importantly, and everyone who listens to this show will know why I'm saying this, thank you for the pleasure you gave me in writing the book and letting me read it.
It's an astonishing piece of work, and it will, I think, continue to delight readers for as long as people read fiction. It's one of those books. I think it has everything that you want a great novel to have. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Laurie.
Nat, when are you planning
Yes.
to bring this book back into print?
You'll howl because it's July. So
Next year.
July of next year. So that's not that many months to go.
No.
July 2025. The good news is, Nat, as you know, people will be listening to this in July 2025 and subsequent months and years.
Yes.
So good. Just hang on in there, everybody. Just 9 months to go. 9 months to go. Right. John, I think we should wrap up.
I think we should. Although I have to say, what huge fun this has been, and could talk about this novel even longer. We have to say huge thanks to Nat and to Jeffery for deepening our appreciation of this wonderful book and of the life and work of Lore Segal. Also to our producer, Nikki Birch, for turning our conversation into what we can only describe as a podcast, weaving our four voices into one.
If you want show notes with clips, links, and suggestions for further reading for this show and the 218 that we've already recorded, please visit our website at backlisted.fm. If you want to buy the books discussed or this or any of our other shows, visit our bookshop at bookshop.org, specifically in July 2025, and choose Backlisted as your bookshop. And we're still keen to hear from you on X, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and wherever else you feel compelled to write from.
If you want to hear Backlisted early and ad-free, you can subscribe to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/backlisted. Your subscription brings other benefits if you subscribe at the lock listener level. For less than the cost of a quart of house bourbon at the Bloomsbury Arms, you'll get not one but two extra exclusive podcasts every month. Locklisted features the three of us talking and recommending the books, films and music we've enjoyed in the previous fortnight. For those of you who enjoyed our What Have You Been Reading slot, that's where you'll now find it. It's an hour of tunes, musings, and superior book chat. Also, Lock listeners get their names read out on the podcast, accompanied by praise like this. Joan Rabb, thank you very much. Julie Lasky, thank you. Anne Drewer, thank you, Anne. Ilona Love, great name, thank you. Simon Brooks, thank you.
Pete Sherman, thank you, Pete. Charlotte Kersley, thank you. Hannah Thorne, thank you. Sarah Bannock, thank you. Wendy Williams, thank you. And thanks so much for listening, everyone. For those who fancy it and are in London, why not join us live at Foyles in Charing Cross Road at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, the 25th of September, 2024, for the live recording of an episode dedicated to The Parable of the Sower by the amazing American sci-fi writer Octavia Butler, with special guests and friends of the show, Selena Godden and Una McCormack. You can book via the Backlisted website or via Foyles. Before we go, Nat, is there anything we haven't discussed about Laura or about Her First American that you would like to add?
Everything that Laurie put in that book, she thought about. She meant, she cared about. And Jeffrey, you were talking about whether it was political or not political, or looking at it through a political lens or not a political lens. Laurie is a very switched on, compassionate, non-judgmental person. You know, it's a fabulous book because of that.
Jeff, anything you'd like to add?
Well, I would also like to break the fourth wall and simply thank Laurie for her work and her mentorship and her friendship. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Thank you, everybody. It's amazing.
Thank you, everybody. So we'll be back in a fortnight. If you just keep listening, you'll hear one last contribution from Lore that we wanted to share with you, reflecting how somebody of her great experience interacts with the world of current affairs and literature. And we felt all listeners to this show will really appreciate what she says here. So thanks very much, Jeff. Thanks, Nat. This has been fantastic.
Please do read the book because you will not regret it.
Yeah, absolutely. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
I'm wondering how much you follow what's happening in our country, in the world. Are you someone who reads the news obsessively, or do you try and keep it at bay?
I do read it, and I also try to avoid it. My joke is, and it's not really much of a joke, that I'm reading Shakespeare and Virgil in order because it's easier to deal with the horrors of long ago than the horrors of today. I don't have to be scared of what will happen tomorrow in 2,000 years ago. I am scared of what will happen tomorrow here. So I hide out in the literature of the past.
I don't want to I don't want to rouse you into feeling those terrible things about the future and the present, but I'm wondering what worries you the most?
Whatever. I bet it's the same thing that worries you.
Well, I mean, ultimately that we're all going to blow each other up. I think that's
all. That's all I mean. Blow each other up, shoot each other.
Yeah.
Nothing new. Nothing. I mean, what I'm reading in the past is that's what was happening then also.
Right. Yeah.
But except I don't have to be. It's in the past. I don't recommend this. I don't think it's a good idea, but that's how I'm hiding from what scares me.